Hi, folks, and welcome to the 25th episode of the Video Recent podcast. I have the honor today of chatting to David Joyner, an American writer based in Japan. Dave is the author of Kanagawa and Lotus Land, and he will discuss with us how living in Asia has influenced him as a novelist. So, if this is something you are into, stick around, and you're going to hear your insights about expat life in Japan and in Vietnam. I trust you enjoy this episode and express satisfaction with a thumbs up. And if you haven't, please subscribe to my channel. It's very helpful to distribute the content. I will see you in a sec.
Hi, Dave. Welcome to my podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this conversation and there are many reasons for that. One is to know more about your work, your books, and the second is that you are based that far from me in Japan. So I talk to people from different parts of the world, or based in different parts of the world, better said. So they are like in other continents, like of Israel, US, but Japan is another story. It's 8 hours away, So as you said, you are having your sake because it's already 9 p.m. So
That's right.
yeah. So I'm very excited about this. So I played an introduction of yourself, but if you don't mind, expand a bit more and tell the viewers who you are, that they will know who is with us today.
Sure. So my name is David Joyner, and I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. Although I haven't called that home for over 35 years. I have spent close to 9 years in Japan. I first came here in 1991 as a college exchange student. I was in Sapporo during that time on the northernmost island of Hokkaido. And I've also spent close to 12 years in Vietnam. And the first time that I went there was in 1994 as a volunteer teacher. And at that time, I was the first American since the end of the war there to live and work in Dong Nai province, which is just north of Saigon, of Ho Chi Minh City. And I'm the author of 3 novels, Lotus Land, Kanazawa, and The Heron Catchers. The last 2 were published in the last couple of years by Stonebridge Press. And the first novel, Lotus Land, is set in Vietnam. And that was originally published in 2015 by Guernica Editions. And I now live in Kanazawa with my wife and our 2 Vietnamese rescue cats, who may or may not make an appearance tonight. I'm not sure.
So there are cats around. Yeah, viewers, I used to that because I have a cat myself. Sometimes he shows up in front of me, or he can be on the top of the bookcase. So everything is possible. But he's having a sleep now because at least my cat, he prefers to sleep during the day. I don't know if Vietnamese cats are that different, or how are
I doubt
how are they?
that different. I don't think so. They're great. They're wonderful to have. They're a joy to my wife and to myself. So we're happy to have them. They just turned 10 years old, so they're still pretty spry.
Yeah. What are their names? Do they have Vietnamese names, or?
I don't know where the names came from. My wife gave them names So and Se, which comes from the Japanese syllabary. She just chose 2 of them. I never did find out why. I think I asked numerous times and I could never quite figure it out. She just liked the sound of it, I think.
Yeah.
So they're actually we actually, there were a whole bunch of stray cats that we nearly we either saved them or tried to, and she gave them again more names from this Japanese syllabary. So it just went on and on and on. So
Yeah. Okay, but let's set aside the cats because I'm a big fan of cats. I could spend the next 2 hours talking about cats, and that's not
right.
what we are here for. Maybe we can do a separate episode on cats, but for now, let's get back to your work. So, how much of that is influenced by your expat life in Asia?
I generally think that it's not. informed that much. I mean, my characters are not me. That's what I tell myself, but then people will point out that there are certain similarities between, experiences that my characters have and experiences that I've had in my life in Vietnam or in Japan. So I have borrowed from some of my own experiences overseas, but the characters are, I'll stick to my guns here, and they're not me at all. So, but there are a number of people who sort of confuse my characters with me and think that we're the same.
Are the stories happening in Japan, Vietnam, or they happen all over the world?
The Lotus Land takes place. Half of it takes place in Saigon, and half of it takes place in Hanoi, and it's almost an even split between the two settings. And I did that on purpose, but I did it also because I've lived in both cities for a number of years, and I know about them well. And it was easy for me to set the novel in those places where I live, and it was something that the story needed. So, and then in Kanazawa, obviously, I set that novel here where we live in Japan, and that was a deliberate choice. I wanted to write a novel and be the first novelist who had a work set in Kanazawa published in English. I wanted to be the first person to do that. So that was a deliberate choice to set that novel here. And then the second Japanese novel, my third novel, The Heron Catchers, is set both in Kanazawa and Yamanaka Onsen. And Yamanaka Onsen is about an hour south of Kanazawa. They're both in Ishikawa Prefecture, where we live. And we bought an abandoned house there, I think in 2017. And since that time, I've gotten to know the town very well and the village where we have a house there. And again, I wanted to see if I could set a novel where I have, in a place that I've gotten to know very well and that I feel very connected to. And I wanted to share that with my readers if I could. And again, I wanted to be the first person to write a novel set there written in English. So.
So I presume, if not all, at least some of the characters are Vietnamese or Japanese or from
absolutely
of Asia.
Absolutely.
So,
but the point of view characters are never Vietnamese or Japanese. They're always an American character, an American man, more or less my age. I don't tell stories from the perspectives of non-Americans or even of women. It's something that I've sort of been told is not something that I should be doing. And I don't mind not doing that. I'm perfectly comfortable writing the stories that I do from the points of view that I use. And it's really not an issue, but it's not something that I'm comfortable doing, really. There's there's a lot of pressure to sort of not go there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'd say it's hard now because you have a mindset of an American or of a Western. So to pretend that you can describe situations or express feelings that are, let's say, purely Asian, it's a hard job. Although you are, I think, very much embedded to the culture because your wife is local, probably most of people are local. How much are you embedded in the Japanese life at this point?
It's hard to say. I mean, obviously my wife is Japanese. We use Japanese every day. I don't have a lot of interaction with local people, but it's not from a lack of trying. It's hard to break into the local community and to sort of be accepted. And it's not as if I've had problems being accepted. I think that Japanese people have difficulty being accepted by other Japanese people as well. It's just that kind of society. And I feel as integrated here as I could be, I think. I feel in some ways more integrated than other foreigners I know here. And in some cases, I'm less integrated. When I used to work at a university, I did feel more integrated into the community. But most of the people that I had any interaction with, they were all foreigners too. So at work, we were using English all the time. We were teaching in English. So it was just a job. And my friends were all English speaking friends. There was no overlap between departments socially or even professionally. So, but again, like I said, I don't know that that's true only for foreigners. I don't think there's a lot of social overlap between Japanese people. Having said that, in Vietnam, it was a complete opposite. Not that I was, well, the first time that I went there as a volunteer, I was one of only 2 foreigners in the whole province, in Dong Nai province. And I was the first foreign teacher that they'd ever had. And I was one of very few Americans who were living and working in Vietnam at the time. And they were very appreciative of my presence and my willingness to be a volunteer teacher. And so they took incredible care of me. And I really felt very much a part of the community there. They made a special point to help me sort of integrate. They taught me Vietnamese. They introduced me to all kinds of different people. They showed me all over the province. They were wonderful to me, absolutely wonderful. Other times that I've lived there, I've gone there on my own. And so it's been my responsibility to kind of find my own community. And it's not quite so easy there. But the Vietnamese people on the whole are so outgoing and so friendly. And they're not shy at all about talking to you, stopping you on the street, approaching you in a cafe or whatever the case may be. It's very different from living here in Japan.
Yeah, because as you said, like the Japanese themselves, they don't hang out that often with other Japanese. So why would they approach foreigners? And I would say that even the level of English is not great, but you speak Japanese. Which I would think would surprise most people when you start a couple of sentences in Japanese. How are people's reactions to that?
They're surprised. They're very polite whenever I speak it. So even if I just say, excuse me, are you open now? If I enter a store or a restaurant or something, they'll just say, oh, you're so good at Japanese or something like that. And all kinds of foreigners have the same stories, where they're just being polite. But you can get a big head about that and think, oh, I'm so good at Japanese. But you've really had it's not a real conversation. But I know that I'm able to converse because that's the language that I use with my wife every day. And my Japanese could definitely be better. But people in general are surprised. I think when they see me, they automatically guess that I'm a tourist. And then when they hear me speak Japanese, they assume rightly that I live in Japan, but they don't think that that I live in Kanazawa. And then when I tell them that I've been here for a number of years, then that kind of opens up the door for more conversation. But
are you able to write in Japanese as well, or just speak?
No. I used to be able to back when I was a student, and I got tested. But without that kind of pressure, I don't study I don't practice writing. I can read some kanji. I have no problem with hiragana or katakana, was the much simpler syllabary. It's the way that you spell out the pronunciation, the sounds of kanji. So that's not a problem at all. I can write that. It's very easy. But kanji, forget it. They're so very difficult. It's one day I would love to be able to do that, but I'm not getting any younger, but I'm not getting any closer to being able to do that. So,
yeah. So in terms of influences, like we mentioned the environment, where you live. In terms of authors, is there any that you can refer as mentors to your writing?
Yeah, Japanese authors in particular. I mean, I've really focused my energy as a reader on the Japanese canon, and so I've read pretty much all the classics, and I've focused on the modern classics, say from the early 1900s up until the 1970s or so. There's I think it was a golden age for Japanese literature. Contemporary authors are enjoying popularity that their predecessors never really saw during their lifetimes. I think there's a huge audience now for Japanese fiction, but I feel that most of the fiction that's being translated is, in most cases, it's what I would call light fiction. And I don't know how much of it will be read 20 or 30 years from now, whereas the modern classics that I go back to sometimes, I think that those will continue to be read for, in some cases forever, probably. So, but yeah, there are some writers in particular, Natsume Soseki, Izumi Kyoka, who is a local writer, a writer from Kanazawa. Not many people know of him. He hasn't been translated that much into English, but there are two collections of stories that one can find. But probably more than any other, Yasunari Kawabata, who has had very many of his works translated into English by, the best of them, I think, are translated by an American man named Edward Seidenstecker. And he passed away maybe 20 years ago. I'm not exactly sure when, but he worked mainly in from the mid to kind of the late 20th century, I guess. But he was Kawabata's primary translator. And so when I say that I read Kawabata, I'm also reading Seidenstecker. But I've read, I used to make a habit of rereading Kawabata every year. There's just a lot for me, I feel personally, to gain from reading his work. I don't know any other writer who feels that way necessarily about his work. I know a lot of people who like his work. They wouldn't sort of approach his work the way that I have. I've written out his novels, partly as a way to just study the way that he structures his books, the way that he transitions from one scene to another, or from, all kinds of different things. And that was an exercise that I did when I was much younger and kind of starting out. But he's probably been the biggest influence on me as a writer. So I really enjoy his work. But there are a lot of people out there who don't like his work at all.
Yeah, I was trying to think here how much versed I am in Japanese literature. And the name that came to my mind was, I can't remember now the first name, but Mishima. What's his first name?
Yukio Mishima.
Yukio Mishima. Yeah, so
Correct.
he was big to me in
great.
my early 20s.
Yeah, he's had a pretty big influence on me as well, but he was just such a unique storyteller. He was just such an intellectual. And again, Seidenstecker translated some of his work too, some of his best work, his most highly regarded work. And he has a connection to Kanazawa as well. His grandmother was from here, and Kanazawa has all these literary connections, and he's one of them. But Yeah, he's quite famous. The Japanese don't like him, his work, certainly not his persona, as much as people in the West like him, or at least are interested in and fascinated by him.
And why is that?
I think it was because of the way he died, taking over the self-defense forces with his own militia, and committing harikiri and that kind of thing, or seppuku, and so I think he was just too brash for a lot of Japanese. They found him kind of distasteful in certain respects, and people don't read him nearly as much as here as they do in the West. I think that's almost certain.
Yeah, that actually happens with other authors that are more popular abroad. They'll be in their home country. I don't know why it's that. I think sometimes there's some friction between the the person and the community, because I believe that some people are okay with consuming someone's product if they don't need to deal with that person. Let's say the guy is not the most pleasant, so they they kind of see that in the interaction he or she has with others, and then they just walk away from their books, their songs, their movies, which in my opinion it's a mistake. Like most people or they have their idols as long as they don't talk to them, that's very common. So that's why I think I don't want to get much into the cancel culture here, but I think like people wouldn't read some authors if they have to talk to them these days. So they kind of forgive because they are not around. So it's fine. But if they have to talk to them, then no. Then they will just say no. He is a bad person, so his books won't be in my bookcase.
Right. Like I hear that a lot in America with like Hemingway. Oh, he was such an odious person. He was just terrible guy. I'm not going to read any of his books. No, I'm not going to touch his work. I mean, that's such a ridiculous attitude to have. I mean, the person is not the work necessarily. I mean, it's a shame that people have those attitudes, and it seems to be catching on in a lot of ways.
I would also say that like a few authors are very boring as human beings. They're not really entertaining. Like I wouldn't invite them to my podcast because they don't have the spark, So
right.
Like you don't need. You can be a genius, but you might not be a person you want to talk that others want to talk to. It's a different thing. Which is fine. Like you don't need to be social. We don't need to be entertaining. Just it's a different profile, but people kind of mix it. I would love to have Hemingway if he was around, even if he was that much of an asshole, I wouldn't care. Plus, my views will go up, so no problem. No problem. If someone sees Hemingway around, just let me know. His email address if he has one. Yeah. So you mentioned the Japanese being very much close to their own circle. They won't approach foreigners that much, but when you manage to talk to them and you can speak in Japanese, so you might have insights that the majority of others don't. What's their common perception of the road and of foreigners in general? Not just those who are in Japan, but people all over the planet.
It really depends. I mean, obviously, it depends. If you were to go to the place that we have in the mountains, where we got that abandoned home and fixed it up, all of our neighbors, first of all, they're in their mid 80s, but they're very healthy. They're always outside working in their gardens at the same time that I'm working in my garden, and we always talk to each other when we see each other. They're very friendly. They're very different. It's a very different experience going up there and interacting with people, because people are much more interested in me. Perhaps it's because I'm in the countryside and they see even fewer foreigners than they do in other parts of this part of Japan. But, people, and it could also be a product of their age. People in the village are really quite old. And but they're so nice. They're so friendly. In the city, though, tourism has really taken over. And when we moved here in 2015, we moved here the day before the bullet train started running between Tokyo and Kanazawa. And as soon as that connection was made, you just had this huge increase in foreigners in the city. And the city has really struggled to deal with the communication barriers. Nobody here really speaks English very well. It's kind of shocking in this day and age. And I think a lot of people are afraid of finding themselves in a situation where they have to speak English. And so they see a foreigner, they're walking on the same side of the road. They might cross the road and just walk on the other side or something like that.
Wow,
yeah,
that's mad.
Yeah, it's mad. It's happened a few times. That's not something that happens all the time. I don't want you to have that sense of things here, but it certainly happens here sometimes. But I've approached people asking for information or directions or something like that. Maybe not in Kanazawa, but in other sort of regional cities like Kanazawa. And people have been, for the most part, very helpful. But if I'm sitting on a bus or on a train and it's getting more and more crowded, well, there's a seat next to me that's open and nobody's sitting down in it. They'll choose to stand in the aisle rather than sit down next to me. And my first reaction is like, oh, they don't want to sit next to the foreigner. They don't like foreigners or something. But that's not necessarily the case. I think sometimes they're being polite and giving me that extra space, thinking that I would be more uncomfortable having that extra space. And if they were to sit down next to me, that they would be inconveniencing me. Or if I need to get up and leave the bus, they wouldn't be obstructing me by sitting in the seat next to me. Those kinds of situations exist also. But maybe it's true that they're just shy, that they think that I might start speaking to them in English, and they're just not prepared to do that. Yeah. Even though everybody in Japan studies English from about the age of 4 or 5 all the way through high school. And if they go to college, almost everyone studies it in college too. But I've been a teacher of English in Japanese universities. And even at the age of 20 or 21 years old, if I ask them, what's your name and where are you from? They can't answer me without consulting with the person sitting next to them, or they can't answer me at all. So that sort of explains a lot of why people are very hesitant to interact with foreigners here. I think they just have absolutely no confidence. They have the learning a lot of the time, but for whatever reasons, it's very rare that I am able to communicate with people on even the most superficial level in English. Now I don't really need to, but people view me, I think, automatically as an English speaker. I could be from anywhere in the world. I could be French, I could be German, whatever, but they just assume that I'm American. They assume everyone is American and speaks English. And it's a funny situation here.
Yeah, there was only one time that I was taken as an American, and I'm going to tell you where. Yes, I mean, I could be American because Americans are very much diverse, but I wouldn't think that someone would look at me and think I have an American passport in my pocket. No, so that happened in Vladivostok. So I did the Trans-Siberian, from Moscow to Vladivostok.
Yeah,
and there were only 3 nationalities there. I mean, there were more, but I'm just generalizing. Obviously, there were Russians, there were Japanese, and there were American. And between the 3, they thought, this guy has to be American because there are only 3 nationalities in the city. So I think I was even asked from what part of US I was coming from. I was like, what?
Did you make something up?
Maybe it's better not to tell here in public.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
But that was the closest I've been to Japan when I was in Vladivostok.
Hmm.
Maybe the closest was South Korea. I don't know geographically what is closer, but it's somewhere
Yeah.
near, let's say, if you are in Europe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, South Korea, North Korea are separated from where I live on the Japan, but just by the Japan Sea. So it's very close.
Can you get there by ship?
You could get there by ship. There's a large cruise terminal here, and there are, yeah, people holiday in South Korea from here. There are, I think, the local airport, which is very, very small, does have maybe 2 flights a week to Seoul or to Busan or something like that. Yeah.
Other thing you referred before was that your neighbors are in their mid 80s. Yeah, so mid 80s for European standards, it's quite old. Like most people lived up to the age of 80. But what we hear from Japan is that people can easily live up to the age of 100.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't seem to be a big deal. Which here it's news. If you are 100, you're going to be on social media for sure, and maybe
Sure.
the local consular will visit you with a cake or with something. So
that's right. Yeah.
Is it really the case in Japan?
Oh yeah, there are thousands of centenarians here, thousands of them, and it's not uncommon at all. Like I said, the people who are in their upper 80s who live next door to us there, I mean, they're out every day working for hours in their fields. It's incredible. They're still professional farmers. There's a guy just up from where we are here in Kanazawa he's 93 or 94 years old, and he's built a tree house that he uses to trim his branches. So he climbs up this really rickety ladder onto they're just boards they're not even nailed in. Wow. And he climbs up there and he clips his trees, and he's 93 or 94 years old, and he's 20 feet up in the air doing all this. And I'm like, you're mad. What are you doing?
That's impressive. And why do you think they can live that long in Japan? What's the recipe? What's the secret? Is there anything you can point out as the reason why the life expectancy is that high?
I think that they take care of themselves pretty well. There's a lot of drinking here. This is a heavy drinking culture, especially for men. But there's virtually no obesity here. And, children in schools eat some of the healthiest lunches that I've ever seen. It's incredible, the nutrition that they get, and that they're eager to eat. They love vegetables, these 5-year-old kids, these 8-year-old kids, these 11-year-old kids, they're gobbling up vegetables in their meals, and they have this just wonderfully nutritious meals. Whereas, when I grew up, everybody, if you brought your school lunch, it would be like a peanut butter sandwich, some cookies, and maybe like some chocolate milk or something like that, or like a cheese sandwich. They were pathetic. No nutrition at all. And, breakfast was like some sugary cereal, and dinner was, a hamburger or something. It's no wonder that, Americans are obese and oftentimes don't really know how to take care of themselves well when it comes to their health. Whereas in Japan, they're taught from a very early age how to eat, and portion size too. They don't go overboard. Any dessert that you order is a very, very small portion. Your dinners, your lunches are generally pretty small as well. And people walk a lot here. They do a lot of walking. And I think that anyone who gardens on a regular basis or who farms, they're going to be in pretty good shape. It's not easy to do that kind of work, especially if the work isn't mechanized the way that it often is in the United States. They're using their muscles all the time. They're bending down, they're standing up, and it's just a very sort of healthy lifestyle.
Yeah. Actually, I was watching a short of Jordan Peterson talking to a guy. Can't remember who is the other guy. Sorry, it's my bad. but they were discussing that by 2030, I don't know, in the near future, so the next 6 years, 1 in 2 Americans are going to be obese, and not overweight, obese. That's
Wow,
a lot.
Yeah, it's
So
incredible.
chances are that next time you sit on a plane to the US, you're going to be squeezed.
yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I mean that's a situation. It's night and day. When I go back to the States, I mean, it's probably the first thing that I notice is people are obese, or the tourists who are here, who come here not only from the United States, they could be from Western Europe too. They're just much bigger than the Japanese people. And they have trouble walking. You're obese. Most people don't walk with a smooth gait.
Yeah.
Whereas in Japan, that's generally not the case, it's very noticeable.
Yeah. And I think it's not only the walking, it's the breathing. Because if you are heavy, then it's a struggle to walk, to make some movements, even
That's right.
to think and put your ideas and plans and projects together, because it's just too much for you to carry. So it's
Right.
it's always a better thing to be light. It's because probably you're gonna make better decisions based on that.
Yeah, I think so. I agree with that.
So, do you miss the States or not much?
No, I don't miss the States. I don't miss the States.
What is it?
I miss friends there, and I miss my family. My parents are in their late 80s. They're still in Ohio. My brother's in San Diego, which is nice because San Diego is great. It's a great city, first of all, but also I can take a direct flight from Tokyo to San Diego, and then from there I continue on to Ohio, which is not a straight shot. But I always try to get back about twice a year, but it's difficult, and I always go back for Christmas, and then I come back for New Year's because that's the biggest holiday in Japan. That's the biggest family holiday. So my wife always wants to come back and spend that holiday with her mom. And then her brother comes in with his family and everybody's all together. And that's the only time during the year that they do that. So we're in America for much of December. It's difficult for me to come back. And with the election coming up at the end of November, I don't know what's going to happen in the US. I don't know what kind of violence there's going to be. I don't know if there's going to be violence, are people going to be targeted? Who are those people going to be? Do I really want to bring my wife with me in a situation like that? These are questions that I shouldn't have to consider, and yet I am. And so the way that I approach America now is very different than the way that I approached it in the past when I was living overseas. It's not a pleasant place to come back to. It's so divisive. The violence it just never seems to stop. It's so random a lot of the time. And I mean, I know plenty of people who've been affected by random violence and who've lost their lives and things like that. I've had a gun pointed at my head in a parking lot, by some drunk guy. And again, I don't want to subject my wife to that. So it's hard for me to keep coming back, I have to say. But my parents, like I said, they're in their late 80s, and I need to go back and spend time with them. And if anything happens to them, I need to spend more time than I normally do. So, I do come back to the States. I don't miss it. I think if I had no reason to come back, I wouldn't. There are too many other places in the world that I want to see and spend time in, that I want to experience. I sort of go back to America because I have to. There's things about America that I like, but it's there's so many things about the country that are, that really bother me.
And what are those, the positive ones?
Nature is a big part of it. Having a lot of space for yourself. The wildlife, you can, it's a big country. And when we moved back to the States at the end of 2019, and we stayed there until mid 2022. It was during the pandemic, so it was a really weird time to be back. It was not a typical experience for myself or for my wife. And but where we lived, we had bobcats in our yard, we had coyotes in the yard, we had ground squirrels all over the place. It's true, we had rattlesnakes that I didn't particularly like to see. We had scorpions that got in the house numerous times, but it was just such a beautiful area. And wherever you go in the country is just, I think America is a very beautiful country. And that's what I enjoy the most when I go back there. The food is a lot better than it used to be. There are a lot more choices, and I do like going out to eat quite a bit in America. And it has some wonderful museums. It's easy to go out and play sports if you want. Oftentimes it's for free, whereas in Japan, if you want to go out and play sports, there's no venue for you, and if there is one, you have to pay quite a bit of money to use it. Things like that. I suppose they're kind of superficial. I love the bookstores. Every time I'm back in the States, I mean, one of the first places I go back to is, are the bookstores. So that kind of thing too.
And besides America, from the Western life in general, let's say from Europe, from other parts in the West, just because you are in Japan, is there anything that you lack that you would bring it there if you could?
No, I don't think there's anything that I feel that I lack. Even when I was in Vietnam in the early 90s and the country had nothing, just state-owned stores with like nothing on the shelves. Even in that situation, I didn't feel that I was lacking. Even here, I almost never eat Western food. It's almost always Japanese food or Vietnamese food. I either make Vietnamese food or we go to Vietnamese restaurants 45 minutes from here because that's where the best Vietnamese food is. When I'm in Vietnam, I don't eat Western food. I eat Vietnamese food because it's so good. And there are plenty of Japanese options there too. So food-wise, I don't feel that I lack for anything. No, there's really nothing. And if there's something that I need, I can order anything on Amazon or on Rakuten. You can get anything from anywhere now. So but
these days it's very different.
Yeah.
I had a guest. He's Canadian. He's a life coach. He spends most of his time in Bali, but he also travels around Asia. He goes to Thailand. He goes to India very often. And I was very interested in having his views of life as such and in specific death by being in Asia. Did that change you? From being in Vietnam and now in Japan, how you see the whole existence as such?
For myself?
Yes.
Sort of like my personal sort of evolution?
Yeah, like evolution, like the concept of human species, finitude, those things, universe, if you like it. Because I think the culture and the religion and the civilization itself has a totally different understanding of who we are and what are we here for.
Yeah, that's interesting. Excuse me. I mean, the first time that I went to Japan in 1991, the first time that I went to Vietnam in 1994, I mean, I just felt like the world opened up so much for me. And in very different ways. I mean, you might think that the experience that I had when I stepped off the plane in Japan was maybe similar to the way that I felt when I stepped off the plane in Hanoi in 1994. Completely different reactions, which sort of surprised me. But just seeing the different ways that people live and the things that make people happy, their ability to get along, was one thing that really kind of stood out for me, especially in Vietnam, which was very, very poor when I first went there. But man, were people happy. There were a lot of people that didn't get along. There were historical reasons for people to hate each other and things like that. And maybe that feeling simmered beneath the surface and you didn't see that when people interacted. But I was around the same people for 12 months there, and I was just so impressed by the way that they sort of embraced every day as just a day where they could be happy and just laugh with each other and tell jokes. And it's something that I almost never see in America. People there have it so good, and they don't understand how good they have it. And it's kind of shocking, and it's something that really bothers me when I go back to America. And then when I come back to, especially to Vietnam, or really anywhere in Southeast Asia in particular, I just really notice that there's just a different way to live. There's a different way to approach each day of one's life. And that's not to say that I would trade the life that I have for the life that people there have. I understand that there are many, many difficulties that they have that I don't, and I wouldn't want to have those difficulties. But it was just very eye-opening. It's been such an education for me, and an ongoing education. And I think that's why I enjoy living overseas so much, is that every day, even when I get used to living in Japan, or when I get used to living in Vietnam, every day I see something new, I experience something new, I learn something new. And it's just so stimulating to me.
Yeah.
But beyond the stimulation, I feel very safe here. When I travel in this region of the world, again, I feel very safe. It's I meet really wonderful people. I trust everybody here. It's just a different way of living. It's a whole different existence, and it's something that appeals to me on a very I don't know, a very visceral level, a very deep level. And when I don't have it, when I'm back in the States, I feel really sort of out of sorts, off balance, really off balance.
That resonates with the way I perceive living as an expat or living overseas. Like of course, I'm based in Ireland. I'm Portuguese myself, so the cultural gap is much smaller than would be between you being an American based in the countryside of Japan. But I can relate to that thing of like every day there is an education. It's like an education for free, and there is always something new. So I think even if we don't know, I think individuals like ourselves, we strive for novelty. We want to find that element that we don't know what it is, and somehow we will jump in our way. We might notice, we might not, but it's there. It's there. There's something there. Like just the fact that we were not meant to be where we are, it's already exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when I think, I'm married to my wife, she was born where in the circumstances that she never could have imagined she would marry me. I was born where I was in those specific circumstances. I never would have guessed that the two of us would get together and marry and start a life here together and travel and see the world and the places that we've gone together too. I could have never imagined these things. Like you said, it's a real education, and there's just, I wouldn't trade what I have for anything. I'm very fortunate. I recognize that every single day. And I make sure that I do. I don't want to lose sight of that. Because I don't want to lose sort of what I have now in my life.
Yeah. Did anything change in Japan since you were there, or and if it changed, what was that, and to how much extent?
It's kind of hard to say because it's so gradual. But when I first came here in 1991, my memory of things, I'd like to think that my memories are pretty accurate, but what did I really know and how well did I really process things back then? I'm not sure how much I trust the comparison that I would make between then and now. I'm such a different person now than I was back then too. But I mean, the economy has gone south so far. It's so bad right now that, the optimism that you saw in pretty much everyone, young people especially back in the day, is very different from now. I don't know if it's a sort of a millennial phenomenon or if it's a product of, people being addicted to technology and not interacting with each other the way that they used to 33 years ago, when there was no internet, there were no smartphones, there was no social media. I don't know. I mean, the whole world has changed, and it's kind of hard to say what special ways that Japan has probably changed. I would say that it's a lot more obvious in Vietnam, just because it's developed so much in the last 30 years since I first went there. It's just completely different from what it was back then. Development it changes the whole landscape. People have always been very optimistic about their future. Optimism has always sort of characterized the Vietnamese people for me. The way that they view their future, it's certainly going to be better than their past. So a lot of people just feel there's very much to look forward to. But at the same time, a lot of the changes have not been good changes. The pollution is terrible there. The traffic is atrocious. When I first went there, I never saw anything but bicycles. Now you very rarely see people riding bicycles. They might be pushing bicycles, selling things from the baskets in front or back, but nobody gets around by bicycles now. Used to see horse and carts or carts and oxen, being pulled through the streets. You don't see that now. Skyscrapers and things like that. The skyline has completely changed. A lot of the wetland in the cities has been paved over, and there are apartments there and huge apartment complexes and that kind of thing. The changes are a lot more obvious, I think, in Vietnam.
So you refer that you were one of the first, if not the first, Americans teaching in Vietnam. Did you face any hostility because of the war between the US and Vietnam? Or you're completely welcome, I can see. Nice.
Not at all. Not at all. People appreciated me being back there. And I did have a few kind of run-ins with people, but it was just, they were trying to impress their friends. I twice had drunken vets, maybe in their 50s or 60s, who kind of wanted to start a fight with me in Hanoi in the north. But they were among friends, and the friends immediately pulled them back and scolded them and, brought me to come drink with them. And pretty soon, the guy who was trying to pick a fight with me, we're toasting each other and we're drinking and laughing with our arms around each other. I've never once felt threatened in Vietnam, even as an American, even during those early days when people still had very, very strong memories of the war, and people in the North had very negative feelings about Americans in general. When I had the opportunity to interact with people, that diffused any sort of hostility that they might have felt, I think. And also when you speak the language, or you try to speak the language, it makes you more like them in their eyes. It makes you more human, and it enables you to make a connection with people, even people who might have seen you with hostility in their hearts.
You were talking about the Japanese being heavy drinkers. That's not the image we have it here. And going back to Vladivostok, I went to a couple of these karaoke restaurants, that they have there, which I probably also have in Japan. I know that I haven't been to Japan. Just let me say that before I forget. There are two major countries where I haven't been. One is Japan. The other one is Mexico. Now I've been in most places in Asia, but somehow I'm missing those two. I hope to happen at some point.
Interesting. Get here soon.
But anyway, when I was in those restaurants in Vladivostok, so again, the population would be Russians, not many Russians in those restaurants for some reason, Japanese, and some Americans, and myself, the fake American, as I would call it. But I would never forget the environment. And what I mean by that is that so people were eating and drinking at the same time, which for Europeans it's weird. Either you eat at the restaurant or you go out drinking to the pub. That's two separate things. Okay, and people would have the food on the table, grab wherever they were eating, let's say sushi or some chicken legs or some veggies, and then they would go mad with the music, run to the dance floor, dance, try a flirt, and then go back eat, and then after a few minutes or a few songs, they would return to the dance floor. And the Japanese were drinking like mad bastards. Never forget.
Really?
Yes. Now I thought, that was now that I talk to you, I'm not sure they were doing that because they want to be brave to flirt with the Russian models who are all stunning. We all did that. We all used alcohol, to reach that woman. So nothing new. But it seems that they also drink a lot there in Japan. What do they drink?
They drink. They drink beer a lot. They drink a lot of sake, a lot of shochu, which is which is a kind of spirit made either from potatoes or from wheat. They drink a lot of highballs here. I can't believe how many people I see ordering highballs. They drink quite a bit of whiskey. And whiskey sours or flavored whiskey sours or flavored highballs or whatever. I don't know. I never order those drinks. I'm pretty much just a straight sake person. I'll have the occasional beer, but there's such a huge selection of alcohol here and people drink a lot. They don't go home after work. They go out and they drink together, and they get smashed and they go home at midnight and don't see their kids, and before they go to bed, and then they wake up at the crack of dawn and go back to work, and don't see their kids in the morning and hardly see their spouses. And it's a crazy culture. I think it's relaxing. It's getting more relaxed.
Yeah.
But there was certainly a point not very long ago where that was a businessman's lifestyle, the typical businessman's lifestyle. And it's been devastating for a lot of families and for children's growing up in households, because a lot of the times, although they had fathers, their households were essentially fatherless. And I think that's had a big effect on kind of Japanese society over the years as well. But
I also heard that the suicide rate is above the average. Is there a rationale for that?
I think people are overworked. I think a lot of people find themselves in debt that they have no hope of ever getting out of. A lot of people feel lonely. A lot of people have no one to count on, no one they have no friends, no one that they can turn to, and there is a sense of hopelessness among a large part of the population here. I think that's true. There's a lot of bullying here too. This is a really there's a strong bullying culture that's not only present in schools, but also in the workforce. And that often drives people to suicide as well. So it can be a very difficult place to be, I think, even if you're Japanese.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. So I never spoke to someone based in Japan, so it's really really fascinating to get insights. And I believe like you have the privilege of not being there, so you might put an extra. I also have the impression that when an expat is smart, which is not always the case. I don't want to curse on humanity, but there are a lot of dumb bastards out there. But if you are an expat and smart, you almost have like a third eye. And what I mean by that you be paying attention to things that some people just don't care because they take it for granted. So you will hear sounds, you will even perceive certain things, smell some smells. It's almost like an extra sense, which I think is great. Yeah. So just to finalize, as we are getting to 1 hour, in terms of work, is there any project, anything on the pipeline? I just saw on your Instagram that I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it was just now and I was just scrolling very fast. I think one of your books is nominating to an award.
I was just this morning nominated for a Rubery Book Award. It's based out of the UK. It's an international literary contest for indie books, so small presses and self-published books. And I'm with a small press, so I was very happy to get that nomination. And it's the fourth time that the Heron Catchers has become a finalist in one of these book competitions. But so far I'm 0 for 3, and I'm hoping that this will maybe I'll catch a break with this one. But yeah, so I am planning to reissue my first novel, Lotus Land, in March of 2025 to coincide with the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. So that will be out in early March of next year. And I'm also working on a novel set in the lower Mekong Delta of Cambodia and Vietnam about river dolphin researchers. I've been working on that for about 20 years off and on, and I can't let it go. I've got to give it one more chance. And I'm also trying to start a third novel that's set here in Kanazawa. And then I would have a kind of trilogy of books that are set here where I live. And those are the things that I'm working on now.
Okay, so best of luck for that award. We'll be cheering that you will receive it. So
thank you so much.
It's only 3, the finalists. So it's not a huge battle on 3 people, but I hope you will make
6,
it.
actually. I'm one of 6, but yeah.
6. Still, we are still with you, even if there are 6 or 16. Yeah. So I don't know who are the others, and I apologize in advance, but I will stick.
It's okay.
I stick with you. I stick with you, Dave. Yeah. So it was so much insights about not only Japan. I have to say Vietnam, because you also referred Vietnam quite a lot, and I would be interested in knowing depth more about Hanoi and how is it now. I haven't been to Vietnam myself. I've been to Thailand.
Oh, okay.
I also miss Cambodia. Those are the 3 major countries in in Asia that I miss. But
I hope you get to them soon.
Yeah, hope so too. Yeah, we are this year the big trip we are doing. We go to Brazil in September.
Nice. Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. Maybe next. So maybe next year. Maybe next year.
Okay. Well, let me know.
Yeah. So look, thanks very much for the insights. It was
Thank you.
Huge pleasure. I'm going to put in the description the links to your webpage. Also where people can purchase the book, and fingers crossed that you get the award and you get to celebrate maybe with a glass of sake or a few.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Take care. Have a good one.
All right, you
Bye.
too. See
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye. Bye.